Before there was an empire, before there were emperors, before marble palaces and armies that could cross half a continent, Rome was just a rough settlement on the edge of Italy, sitting beside a river, surrounded by rivals, enemies, and uncertainty. No one looking at that early village could have imagined that one day its name would become a synonym for power itself. And yet that is exactly what happened. Rome did not begin as a miracle. It began as a survival experiment. It began in fear. It began in mud, iron, and blood, and that is why its story still feels unsettling today, because Rome was never just about expansion. Rome was about control, about order, about the terrifying idea that if a people can organize violence better than anyone else, they can eventually rule the world. The earliest Romans lived in a dangerous region where small communities competed for land, water, and security. Their survival depended on discipline, military readiness, and a willingness to adapt. That adaptability became the empire's first secret weapon. Rome borrowed from everyone. It learned from the Etruscans, from the Greeks, from neighboring Italian tribes, and from enemies who forced it to improve. Roman religion, political institutions, military formations, engineering, and even art were shaped by a long process of imitation and reinvention. Rome did not win because it was pure. Rome won because it was ruthless enough to steal what worked and discard what did not. In the early centuries, Rome was ruled by kings, but the Roman mind was already changing. The people who mattered most in Rome did not want to live under a single ruler forever. According to Roman tradition, the last king, Tarquinius Superbus, became a symbol of arrogance and abuse. Whether every detail of the story is true or not, the message was powerful. Rome would not tolerate a king who acted like a tyrant. So in 509 BCE, the monarchy was overthrown and the Roman Republic was born. That moment became one of the most important political turning points in world history. Rome would now be governed not by kings, but by elected magistrates, a senate, assemblies, and a constantly shifting balance of elite power and public pressure. The Republic looked stable from the outside, but underneath it was full of tension. The struggle between patricians and plebeians, between the wealthy elite and the ordinary citizen, never really disappeared. Rome built a political system that gave the illusion of shared power while keeping real control in the hands of a small class of aristocratic families. And yet that system had one enormous advantage: it created competition. Men of ambition could rise by winning military glory, public support, and political influence. That competition made Rome dynamic. It also made Rome unstable, because once a state teaches its leaders that personal glory is the road to power, it also teaches them to put themselves above the Republic. Rome expanded first across Italy. It fought wars, absorbed conquered peoples, and turned enemies into allies when useful. That was one of Rome's most brilliant tactics. Conquest did not always mean destruction. Sometimes it meant incorporation. Rome could defeat a people, give them limited rights, and eventually turn them into part of the system. That flexibility made Roman rule stronger than simple occupation ever could have been. But flexibility had a darker side too. Rome expected loyalty. Rome expected soldiers, taxes, and obedience. Resistance was crushed. Defiance was punished. And every victory created a new frontier that had to be defended. By the time Rome fought the Punic Wars against Carthage, it was no longer a local power. It was becoming something much larger and far more dangerous. Carthage was a wealthy maritime rival with a powerful navy and a strategic position in the Western Mediterranean. The conflict between Rome and Carthage was not just a war between two states. It was a collision between two visions of dominance. The Second Punic War produced one of the most frightening military figures in ancient history, Hannibal. He crossed the Alps with an army and wore elephants, shattered Roman assumptions, and brought the Republic to the edge of panic. For years, Rome lived under the shadow of Hannibal's victories, and that shadow changed Rome forever. Rome survived because it was patient, because it could take catastrophic losses and keep going, because it had a political culture that treated endurance as virtue. Eventually, the tide turned, and Rome destroyed Carthage in the Third Punic War. The city was wiped out as a warning to every enemy that would follow. That act was not just military conquest. It was a message. Rome would not merely defeat you. Rome would erase you if it thought you were a threat. After Carthage, Roman power spread deeper into the Mediterranean world. Greece, Macedonia, Asia Minor, North Africa, Spain, and parts of the Near East came under Roman control. Rome had become an empire before it officially admitted it had become one. But expansion changed Rome from the inside. Riches flooded in, slaves poured into Italy, small farmers were crushed by competition from huge estates. Political violence became normal. The Republic was now too large, too unequal, and too addicted to conquest to remain stable. Ambitious men started to realize that the old rules could be broken. The Gracchi brothers tried to reform the system and were murdered for it. Their deaths revealed something terrifying. In Rome, reform could be fatal. And once the Republic taught its leaders that legal and moral boundaries could be violated with impunity, the road to dictatorship was wide open. That road led to Julius Caesar. Caesar was not just a general. He was a political genius, a propagandist, and a man who understood that in Rome, reputation was a weapon. His conquest of Gaul made him a superstar in Roman public life. He conquered tribes, subdued resistance, and turned distant provinces into symbols of Roman strength. But his success frightened the Senate. The more powerful Caesar became, the more the Republic feared him. That fear pushed both sides toward disaster. When Caesar crossed the Rubicon, he was not just marching an army, he was breaking the old world in half. Civil war followed. Caesar defeated his rivals, seized control, and declared himself dictator for life. The Republic that had once feared kings now had a ruler more powerful than any king. But Caesar's assassination did not save the Republic. It killed the illusion that the old system could be restored. On the Ides of March in 44 BCE, Caesar was stabbed by men who claimed to be defending liberty. Instead, they unleashed another round of chaos. Rome descended again into war, and from that storm emerged Octavian, Caesar's heir, a cold, calculating survivor who understood something his enemies did not. The Roman people were exhausted. They did not want another round of noble ideals. They wanted peace, order, and food. Octavian gave them all three, but at a cost. After defeating Mark Antony and Cleopatra, Octavian became Augustus, the first Roman emperor. He did something brilliant and deeply deceptive. He pretended the Republic still existed while quietly controlling everything that mattered. The Senate remained, but Augustus held the real power. He built a political system that looked traditional but functioned as monarchy in disguise. That was the genius of the early empire. It did not announce tyranny, it normalized it. Augustus created the Pax Romana, a long period of relative peace and prosperity, but that peace was maintained by military strength, administrative discipline, and the constant threat of force. Rome was calmer than before, but it was not free. Under the emperors who followed, Rome became a world of extremes. Some rulers were competent administrators, others were monsters. Tiberius ruled with suspicion. Caligula turned cruelty into performance. Claudius expanded the empire but remained trapped by court politics. Nero became a symbol of excess, rumor, and collapse. Whether every story told about Nero is true or exaggerated by hostile sources, the image stuck. An emperor surrounded by luxury, paranoia, and fire, while the city itself trembled. And that image matters because in Rome, reputation could outlive reality. An emperor did not just rule by law, he ruled by story. After Nero's death, the empire almost tore itself apart. The year 69 CE became known as the Year of the Four Emperors, when civil war, betrayal, and military power decided who would wear the purple. This was one of the clearest warnings in Roman history. The empire was no longer governed by stable institutions. It was governed by the loyalty of armies. Whoever controlled the soldiers controlled the state. That truth would haunt Rome for centuries. The Flavian emperors restored order and built monuments that still define the ancient world, including the Colosseum, a structure that symbolized both Roman greatness and Roman brutality. In that arena, Rome turned violence into entertainment. That was never just spectacle, it was ideology. It said that power could be watched, consumed, and normalized. Later emperors like Trajan expanded the empire to its greatest territorial reach. Hadrian consolidated and fortified. Marcus Aurelius embodied the philosopher-emperor ideal, but even he spent much of his reign fighting on the frontiers. By then, Rome's size had become both its strength and its burden. Every frontier had to be defended. Every province demanded resources. Every success created a new obligation. Then came Commodus, and the atmosphere changed. His reign marked the end of the Pax Romana and the beginning of a more unstable age. The empire became increasingly dependent on the army, the bureaucracy, and the personal competence of emperors who were often far less impressive than the system around them. In the 3rd century, Rome entered one of its darkest periods. Emperors rose and fell at alarming speed. Usurpers appeared everywhere. Armies made and unmade rulers. Inflation, plague, civil war, and foreign invasions strained the empire to its limit. For a time, it looked like Rome might collapse completely. To save the state, Diocletian reorganized it. He split authority, created the Tetrarchy, and attempted to solve a problem that had become impossible to ignore. One man could no longer manage such a massive empire alone. Constantine later emerged from that world and changed it again. He legalized Christianity, founded Constantinople, and shifted the empire's center of gravity eastward. This was not a minor adjustment, it was a transformation. Rome was no longer the uncontested heart of power. The east grew richer, more urban, and more defensible, while the west grew weaker, poorer, and more vulnerable. Christianity spread, the imperial structure evolved, and the old world continued to erode. Meanwhile, the Western Empire faced increasing pressure from migrating peoples, internal weakness, military dependence, and political fragmentation. The Goths, Vandals, and other groups were not simply barbarians at the gate. They were often people moving through a collapsing system that could not absorb them cleanly. In 410 CE, Rome itself was sacked. Later, in 455 CE, it was sacked again. The city that had once terrified the world now looked like a symbol of vulnerability. Finally, in 476 CE, the last Western emperor was deposed. The Western Roman Empire had ended. But Rome did not disappear. It changed shape. Its laws survived. Its language survived. Its roads, institutions, military ideas, architecture, and political vocabulary survived. The Roman Empire ended in the West, but Roman power lived on in the East as the Byzantine Empire, and Roman influence spread through medieval Europe, the Catholic Church, legal tradition, and the later empires that studied Rome as a model. Even today, the United States and much of the modern world still use political concepts Rome helped define: Senate, republic, veto, dictator, empire, citizenship, and civil duty. Rome may be gone, but its shadow is still here. And maybe that is the most unsettling part of the story. Rome was not a perfect civilization destroyed by accident. It was a machine built on ambition, hierarchy, conquest, propaganda, and adaptation. It rose because it knew how to organize power better than anyone else. It endured because it learned from its enemies. It expanded because it could turn war into policy. And it fell because the same traits that made it strong also made it fragile. Once loyalty became personal instead of institutional, once armies chose emperors, once corruption hollowed out the center, once the empire became too large to govern with trust, decline was only a matter of time. Rome teaches one final lesson that still matters in America and everywhere else. No nation falls all at once. It falls in stages. It falls when institutions stop mattering. It falls when the elite begin serving themselves instead of the state. It falls when violence becomes normal. It falls when people mistake size for strength. And it falls when everyone inside the system keeps believing that tomorrow will fix what today refuses to confront. That is the true history of Rome. Not just a story of emperors and battles, but a story of what happens when power becomes a religion, when ambition becomes law, and when a civilization builds a greatness so large that it eventually cannot control its own shadow.